Yeah, that is who he is. That's there's no other way to describe him. I mean, he's just horrible. He's just a really horrible person. And I feel like he needs to stay in prison the rest of his life. Like I said, if he gets out, I don't care if he's 70, he will still do that. He's still evil. People are evil at 70. They can
Yeah.
still commit crime.
I agree. The risk, I spend a lot of time saying exactly that, actually, that just because you're 70, it doesn't take away what's going on up here. That psychological
Right.
need to control and to control the narrative. The other thing, just going back to why I think it was murder, is the fact he deleted all the phone messages, the text messages between you and him. Well, why do that? You had what was it, 3,466 messages on your phone, and all the
Yeah.
bullying and all the things that he said and did to you, he's deleted that. So that again just points to a consciousness of guilt. But do continue. So I interrupted your flow. You
Yeah.
got pregnant, you found out you were
Yeah.
pregnant, and
No, you can interrupt me whenever you want. It's fine. I like going like back and forth and just like straight telling the story.
oh, good.
Um, yeah, so I met him, however you want to put it, and I guess it was a few weeks later I found out I was pregnant. Um, so I didn't tell him right away because of the person he is. And I kind of just, I told my parents. My parents never asked like, oh, well, who the father is. Like we were just like we all agreed that, I want to keep this baby. And I just didn't believe in abortion. Everyone has I'm not saying like for everybody, just for me, myself, I didn't want to have an abortion. So I decided to keep Corey, and my parents were going to help raise him because I was 16 years old. We lived in like the same area, so people talk, and I'm walking around very pregnant. And so Chris finds out that I was pregnant. I was probably around like 8 months pregnant, and he calls me. He was like, "Oh, you're pregnant?" I'm like, "Yeah," and he was like, "Well, is it my kid?" And I was like, "Yeah." And then we met up, and he was just telling me, I'm in college. I can't have a kid. I can't afford a kid. And I was like, "Then go on. Like I don't want you around anyway." So yeah, he basically right from the beginning. I know in the trial it seems like I just threw a kid on him at 5 years old, but that's not what happened. He knew from the get go that I was pregnant, that he was his child. He just didn't acknowledge it until he was made to acknowledge it in court. And even then, he didn't acknowledge that until his parents made him. They made
That's
him
what I was
step
going to
up, and
ask you. Did the parents
yeah,
kind of pressure him to step up and do the right thing? Is that where it came from?
absolutely. And I think that made Chris worse. Like he didn't want to be a father, and his parents are like, you have to be. So that made, and he's already this disgusting abusive person, so who is he going to take it out on? His logical thinking is the child.
Mm.
Because God knows if he even looked at me wrong, I would call the cops. Like he wasn't touching me. So um yeah, I guess that was his mindset. And I wish his family would have realized that he didn't want to be a father, and that's okay. I'm fine with that. Corey didn't need a father. He was doing just fine. If they wanted to be a part of his life, that would be perfectly fine, the grandparents. But they knew how Chris was. They knew he's abused before. Why put a child in that person's life?
Well, maybe they had this ridiculous notion that that might make him grow up, and might
I
make
think
him,
so.
but it doesn't, does it? It brings out all the worst qualities if you don't want that child, because bringing up a child is tough, it's difficult, it's not easy. And maybe that
Yeah.
explains some of the resentment and the punishment side of, the for me, I just felt the motivation to punish Corey and punish you. It felt like the two things were entwined, you know?
Yeah. I think he took his anger out on me, on Corey also, because I would notice like he would be getting more injuries, or there would be more incidences when I fought with Christopher. And that's kind of why I had to be so fake to him. I had to like make him think like I'm trying to like think of an example, but you know when you have to be like nice to your abuser, so they like let you go free or whatever, like, oh, let me out. Like if you're kidnapped or something, it was kind of like that situation. Like I had to just pretend to, be nice to him so he wouldn't do this to Corey because what else am I gonna do? Court's not helping, DCPMP is not working, the cops aren't helping. So the best thing I can do is just pretend to like this guy so, maybe he won't hurt Corey. That's the best thing I could think of since no one else was doing anything.
You were trying to manage the coercive controller and make sure, and it's
Yeah,
not easy to do that. It's like a hostage situation, where you're
that's
constantly
what
having
it feels
to,
like.
yeah, you're pushing your
Yeah,
own needs and thoughts down because you don't want to escalate things with them. It's like a walking on eggshells and not wanting to get that reaction from them, but you know that it's Corey that's at risk. And that's a very difficult
yeah,
place when you're asking other people for help and you're sounding the alarm, which, 100 reports, Brie, my goodness. I mean, I would expect some professional to think, hang on, we need to look at this properly and should have looked at it
yeah,
far earlier. And well, let's take a step back and go back to when he comes into Corey's life because things go
yeah.
wrong quite quickly, don't they? It wasn't
They
it
do.
wasn't that they had lots of visits and things were okay. You were actually concerned from the start that Corey,
Yes.
had a busted lip, and you were worried about that.
Yeah. So, the first time it happened, so Chris went and he got visitations. They were very quick, like 3 hours, like after school or something, like twice a week in the beginning. And
And just to
I
quickly
think
go
it was
back,
this,
the family court, Judge Silver, was it through that process that he got involved? I think, I read somewhere, or it might have been one of your interviews, that you wanted the state to help with
yeah,
financially with Corey, and then they asked you who the biological father was, and then they tracked him down, which is what worries me about domestic violence, rape, and
yeah.
stalking. Like a woman doesn't want that to happen. I mean, that puts you at risk. It can put the child at risk, right? And it did in this case.
Yeah, that's exactly what happens. I hadn't spoken to Chris in a long time, and we just needed a little bit of help with food stamps or cash assistance. I forgot exactly which one it was, or it could have been both. And they asked for his father's name, and I was so young. I was like, "It's this guy." I gave them the name, but I didn't realize they were gonna go and start a court case against him. Like they literally, it was like, um I forgot what it was, but it was them versus Chris to get. So they gave me the food stamps, but they were suing him basically for the money back that they
Right.
gave me. And then that started a whole like, okay, well, he has to take a paternity test first. And then that went into, oh, I need control and I want him. I want Corey. I want custody.
And probably his mindset and his psychopathology is if I'm being forced to pay, then I want control, you
That's
know?
exactly what it was. Yeah. Yep.
So then, unfortunately for you, and I think one part is you can think that the state are trying to do the right thing and get a man to step into his responsibility. I mean, that's all very well and good if there isn't abuse, if you hadn't have been raped and if he didn't present a risk. But what happened here was that
Right.
he presented a risk, right? And within 6 months, Corey's dead, and it's a very short timeline, isn't it?
What is the fifth planet from the sun? It is big. It is made of gas. It is Jupiter.